Welcome, Adventure. I'm GM Goblin, your GM Goblin. And today I'm going to answer a question from the Andrew the Worthy Shield. He wanted to know about playing a dragon in Pathfinder. And as someone coming from 3.5 many years ago, I loved messing with monster races. So I'm going to go through a handful of ways, legal or otherwise, to play an actual dragon in Pathfinder. So, that's something you want? Stick around. So this is a lovely character from my last campaign, 1 through 20. And she has a thing for dragons. In fact, my first full 1 through 20 campaign with her was Rise of the Rune Lord. She played a blood mage, if I remember right. And no, what was it? She played a blood rager, half orc, and she loved dragons. Found out about her love for dragons during that campaign. But I transformed her completely into a dragon. And of course, I'll go through the code and everything for this buff that I use on her. If you want to do it yourself, and this is going to be in roll 20. But this allowed her to transform with restrictions back and forth so she could be her dragony self. And I found a way to equalize it. But first, let's take a look at some of the old options. And first, let's take a look at a dragon. So everyone knows what a dragon is. It's loved by everyone, hated by everyone, and we usually like to kill them for some reason in all of our games. But as they advance, they go from tiny or small creatures all the way up to gargantuan. They can cast magical spells. They have resistance or immunity to some form of energy resistance, along with some other resistances, damage reduction, breath weapon, iconic, and then, of course, rightful presence. So there's a little bit of an issue with gaining all these abilities as a player just outright. And Paizo has tried to do a few ways to get around that. So first we've got a Dragon Blood Shifter. It is kind of on our march there. Now it does have eventually Form the Dragon too, which is kind of where we're going to be going with this later on. But I'm not a big Shifter fan. There are better classes and archetypes. Druids are a little bit better. I'm not a huge Druid fan, but I'm playing a Goliath Druid. They are great melee combatants. And eventually, that character is going to be transformed all the time. This could allow you to do the same thing with the ability to transform into a dragon-like creature. Only you're using a little bit different rules, and then eventually you're still going to be looking at taking on Form of the Dragon. This one's going to be at 10, and then Dragon 2 is going to be at level 12, so it's a little sooner. And with Wild Shape being a druid, if you're starting a later level campaign, this could be something you do all the time, and then you transform back. A simple magical item can give you extra transformations. Feats can allow your armor to work on your character even when you're in dragon form. So it would be little to no real reason why you couldn't play it in reverse. Another way that you could do that is with a summoner. If you've ever looked at a summoner, and I think I've done a video on summoner, if not, I can do one later, that goes over eidolons and how much fun they are. You can make a draconic eidolon. In fact, there's someone on a Reddit forum, which is why I pulled this up, that mentioned that they had a player that played themselves as the eidolon, and the summoner was actually the individual that traveled along with it. You could totally do something like that. Eidolons are intelligent creatures. You could play as the eidolon. Maybe even your GM will let your summoner be the thing that goes to the other plane. Maybe he's some kind of guide that comes through. You can do a lot of tweaking, which won't affect a whole lot in the game to allow your players to live out their fantasy. And that's why I did what I did, and I've done it before with different monster races. But moving on. Summoner, another good idea. If you don't mind playing an Eidolon, you can even make a funky dragon by the time you're done with it. And then you'll still have all the spell casting from your companion. Dragon Disciple. It is a prestige class, and it was mentioned in some of the forums. It adds some to your sorcery level. It gives you your draconic bloodline and extends it, I guess, a little bit. I don't think it's great. I mean, you're still going into the same thing with the Dragon Form 1 and the Dragon Form 2. This one, you're getting your 2 by level 10, but you wouldn't be too far behind normally. It's just, I don't know if you want to be. Now, if you want to be a caster and everything with your Dragon Form, then this may be a way to go. It's just depending whether or not that's how far the direction you want to take your character. A lot of people, when I think about they want to play dragons, they want to kind of mix it up, but to each their own. Once again, though, you're waiting until later on in level to be able to do this. A lot of times, you're going to have to. Dragons are fairly powerful creatures, as we've already looked at. So, getting them to level with a player's party is going to be difficult, especially if you have players that don't min max and maybe sometimes they're newer, they're underpowered. I will show a little bit about playing a monster race 1 through 20 here in just a minute. So stick around for that. Some of it, actually, most of it comes from 3.5, actually. Dragon Shaman. Oh, let's see here. You do get some of the aspects being that you get a bite with it, and this gets mentioned up. If you want true dragon form, maybe the sorcerer will be a little bit better. This is still going to be druid. I would rather go just being a draconic druid if you wanted to do that, because getting to have that form longer. Time you get Form of the Dragon 1, I mean, that's 10 hours. You're going to be able to be in dragon form more than you will in actual whatever your base form is. Um, Head Switch. Head Switch is a witch archetype, um, but don't confuse it with what I'm about to go over with. So this is from Spheres of Power. I haven't messed around with this a little bit, so I'm kind of going off my cuff. You want to cover Spheres of Power, I can go over some of the casting, a lot of the talents and tricks that you can do with it. None of my players really mess with this for the most part. I probably try and dabble in 3P stuff more than they do. Like my current mummy campaign, if you saw that last video I did. But the reason I mention this Edge Witch, which is in Spheres of Power, you can get all this stuff on Spheres of Power wiki, but it's out of the Ultimate Spheres of Power, is because of this. And this is going to be one of the paths that the Hedge Witch has. Once again, this is not this Hedge Witch, but this Hedge Witch. And so with this, you're going to get the ability to have your breath weapon, and you get this progression, you get wings. So it kind of pushes into that same transformative thing. The only difference is this is not basing off of dragon form like your druid was. It is going to be a different caster system. It is very unlikely that your GM is going to allow you to use some of this stuff unless you get permission from everybody in the party. Usually, unless you're like my guy and you want to rein in 3P content, what I did, not everyone keen to it. I want to play as fair as possible anyway, so I just pulled them in. Another one, if you don't mind 3P, is going to be Dragon Pack Kineticist. This can give you some aspects of having a dragon. If you want to play that, you're still going to be looking mostly at just having draconic aspects, and then eventually dragon aspects 1, 2, and 3, which we get. But you're not playing a full dragon. Something that's hard to come by. You can get breath weapon from it, get the physical abilities. It's almost like playing a dragonborn in a lot of cases. And if that's cool with you, that's fine. I did find this, which is from a 3P content in the Company of Dragons. More on them in a second. But the Tenonym, and this is a playable race. Don't remember what the RP is on this, but it is going to be 3P. It does have, instead of aging as it mentions down here, it is going to be able to increase in size. As a GM, I would not allow you to increase in size above large. And I would actually, if someone playing this race, if you allow it as a GM, I would limit it very much how the companions and eidolons work, which means not allow them to take that large form until they reach around level 7. just because the extra reach and everything, it is going to affect the game. The race itself, you're going to start off small. It's not going to really breathe into that I'm a dragon straight from the start kind of feel to it. You're getting Constitution and Charisma, so this is more based around you being a caster type. Anyway, maybe you could go back and throw in some of that Sorcerer Bloodline and cheese that we looked at. But it's not too impressive, really. I actually think if you don't mind waiting a few levels, that you could go somewhere else. But the classic dragon form is that all forms, reptile and wings, four-legged athletic. Now, in the company of Dragons book, I have not read it, so I can't say. I have heard. If you would like to go find this and look into it, either buy it from here or find somebody with a copy of the PDF for you, that it has some progressions in there for you to play a full-on dragon that's very good and very set in Pathfinder. True Dragonborn is another one that kind of takes up the idea of that progression in level that I was told in the Company of Dragons does as well. But this, from what we can see, is it follows a racial class of 9 levels. This is very much akin to what was mentioned on the comments of that video, which is back in 3.5. We had monsters as races. What this was a blueprint, and it was in a book called Savage Species that walked you through not only some monster races and interesting equipment for them, and of course they all gave more spells all the time, and usually worthless prestige classes, but it broke down a way to try and allow you to play monsters, and it goes very in depth on how to do it, and it gives some examples. I think we've played with trolls for One Monster Generation, and we've done ogres, and the way that it worked was that your effective character level, even mentioned it right there, is transferred to the monster with its level adjustment, so its abilities and stat increases, and its hit dice. This is broken down, and you use a mathematical system to try and make you the same level as players. That's your ECL. Doesn't always do very good. It definitely does not do it very well, unfortunately, with dragons, because of the way dragons just are. They're probably, play them right, a little overpowered for their CR anyway. But following this kind of logic, and with the way that they had of leveling them up, following the logic in the book, you could possibly get your GM to actually build out a level for you. And 2 things. Dragon Magazine, number 320, they go through playing a dragon, level 1 through level 20. And it goes through brass, and it goes through bronze, go through gold, copper, there you go, and even gold. And so if you wanted to pull these out, these were from Dragon Magazine a long time ago. And there's even one for Red Dragon. I think it covers chromatic. Yep. So there you go. There's all of your chromatic and other dragons. And this is very much akin to what we have here. If you look on Pathfinder, a lot of times your classes are more powerful in Pathfinder, just in general. There's a few at the end of 3.5, Dread Necromancer, some other ones from later books that I would consider are pretty on par and could just be transferred over to Pathfinder anyway. And so some people have found that generally, if you take some of the abilities, less of the spellcasting, and just increase the hit dice, and you're progressing them like a monster, that you can get it to work like that. I would take and progress a small dragon and then progress them as you go, and allow your player to, one, obviously still have loot. They're probably going to need it. And you'll have to judge their advancement. Using a system like Nope, wrong one. Using a system like this back in 3.5, whenever I did it, didn't just go by the book because depending on what the player picked, be either a little more powerful or it was underpowered. And the same thing is going to go for these guys. As you can see, even though it's a 12 hit dice, which, is good, it's only 15. So even if you're going average, that's okay. But I think you're really going to want to compare this to the levels you're going to play at to these draconic races and see what you're going to have to play with to mess around. Maybe even going back to just a dragon and progressing them as a monster using the rules one level at a time. And then maybe every other level, you give them an extra hit dice for being a dragon. Maybe if the party is strong enough, then when they get close enough, the next level you advance them to the next CR. It's going to take a little bit of play around, but I think if your party member really wants to play a dragon, they're going to let you do it. Also, if your GM is doing something like this for you, I recommend pizza. But how I did it for my dragon loving fiend here is she was an oracle, and at high enough levels, I think she got this her last 2 or 3 levels. I can't remember when I gave it to her. I'll have to ask her. But I used a version of Dragon Form 3. Dragon Form 3 gives you 8 to your constitution and 10 to your strength, and then natural armor bonus, fly speed, all that kind of stuff. I gave her damage reduction. I did give her a frightful presence, and I based it entirely off of this. So it was great. Only really going to work on kind of the riffraff. It got her to take these advanced goblin race that I made and frighten them, and then she got to blast fire on dozens of them at a time. And then, of course, she still got all these extra attacks that she got because I did give her all the attacks of a dragon. Now, the only difference is you're going to have to progress this with your player with care so that you don't give too much. And especially if it's going to be using a base class. If you're using a base class like what she did, then it's going to be too overpowered. You do this at earlier levels. And if they can use their equipment. The reason I did what I did with her was because when I changed everything on her, she was going from a charisma-based frontliner. Okay. And she didn't have the strength. But her equipment, it was pretty much set in stone at that time. It was all set around her charisma. So what I did was I changed her strength bonus. As you can see, it's higher. Yeah, I did it 14 for her because of how much charisma she had. And so I tried to match her ability. I was playing off making her as competent in one form as the other. So she was still able to deal damage. She could still cast all of her spells because she's a dragon and can talk, but she lost her armor. So we made up for it with a natural armor bonus. She could fly. Well, at their level, they could fly anyway, so it's not a big deal. Blind sense, that's good, but Wizard probably already has that stuff permanent on at least 1 or 2 of you by then anyway. Dark vision, not a big deal. Breath weapon, it's great if you're going to hit multiple targets. DR magic, that gets overcome really easy. In fact, at high levels, if you're going to have a character spend a lot of time in it, you might even add something different because her AC was less as a dragon, but she got an increase to her constitution because I gave her 12 constitution. So she had more HP. And then, of course, I gave her damage reduction, which I allowed creatures to fight her that didn't pass damage reduction. And so in a custom game, this was an easy thing to do. It changes. And the way I have it set up is it is just a buff. Uh, um, this is writing what it basically does and then changes. You go in here, add changes. and it changes all the stats that we need to change, and then perception. And then, there it is, you need a script call. There's a lot of things you can do with this. If you want, ask me in the comments, and I can make a few videos just on making script calls. I use them, I think, every campaign that we play right now. And I use them to transform, like you see here. I use them to transform in my Druids campaign to a whole bunch of stuff. We use it for a hat. And I want to take a look at the code right there. It's just an easy way for you to set up and transform back and forth. And it's set to even change for dark vision and everything so that they actually function on the token itself. And then, of course, it changes to the appropriate size. And then, of course, you've got any kind of effects because I've got animations on my characters. Not everyone uses them. My kineticist uses them in spades because why pay for something if you're not going to use it? While it might be a bit of an annoyance for your GM, I think it's worth it to let your players play what they want as long as what they want isn't just to be more powerful than everyone else. Let your players play a dragon. You can figure out how to do it and keep it on par. Like I said, using one of the dragon magazines allow them to get extra gear to advance them using the monster race idea, which is pretty much on par, or going all the way back to something in one of the books that I mentioned in the Company of Dragons. And that's if you want to be able to do this from the start. If you don't mind playing or you're playing a high level campaign, play Druid. Play Shifter if you need to. But either way, get down with your dragon self and maybe you can convince your GM with that pizza. I think everyone should be able to play what they want as long as it doesn't ruin it for anyone else. I'm pretty loose in a lot of my games, but either way, if it brings them a smile, might as well. We'll see what happens. Either way, enjoy your games this weekend.